I'm Taylor Riggs in San Francisco, in for Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Cook FaceTime. President Trump tours Apple's Austin, Texas factory at a time when the White House considers whether to exempt Apple goods from a 15% tariff. We'll have the latest. And Mouseketeer commandeers. Hackers strike the new Disney Plus streaming service. We'll have details. Plus, come clean. Senator Phil Holley says big tech is spinning some tall tales. He wants Facebook and Google to stop using, quote, lawyer speak when it comes to tracking user data. But first, to our top story. We begin this hour with Disney's new problem. It is password thieves. Some customers of the new Disney Plus streaming service say their usernames and passwords have been sold online to third parties. However, Disney says its system hasn't been hacked. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri. So, Chris, how big of an issue are the hackers?
It's an issue for all companies, and this is kind of a new threat for Disney. I mean, they've collected passwords and had accounts for customers in the past, but this is part of a whole global push to start this direct-to-consumer business. They want to have 90 million customers for Disney Plus, their streaming service, in 5 years, and they're already well on their way. 10 million signups in one day alone last week. So they're going to have to learn how to manage this.
So, Chris, if Disney says they weren't hacked, what happened then with the passwords?
The company is saying that basically previous security breaches at other companies, people's passwords and usernames were out there, and hackers took those and used that to log into Disney Plus and then try to resell those services. And Disney says it's, uses a sort of a two-phase authentication process. So if you try to log in with a new device, it will send you an email to your original, user saying, hey, is this authorized? And when they're aware of something or see something suspicious, they're letting customers know. So they're trying to stay proactive.
Chris, as Disney tries to become more and more of a tech company, do they have the back-end infrastructure to support that endeavor?
Well, right now, the answer's been maybe. I mean, they had this huge launch last week, and there were a lot of customer complaints. There was a couple of things that happened. One is customers are having trouble just literally watching the videos. It was buffering. And Disney admitted that there was an issue with their software. They tested the software in the past, and it seemed to work, but they were not really ready at the scale of which 10 million customers presented. And there were also a lot of customers who were having problems signing up last week. And Disney said that wasn't so much their issue, in the sense there's a lot of customers who maybe signed up earlier, forgotten their password, and so there were customers who are already maybe a subscriber to Hulu or ESPN Plus, who then wanted to bundle in Disney Plus, and it was just a complex thing to get all those people on board.
Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri, all things Disney Plus streaming. Thank you for joining. Now, networking products company Netgear hosted its Analyst Day at the NASDAQ on Wednesday. Among the products being highlighted, Netgear's Wi-Fi mesh system and the expansion of Netgear's Mural digital canvas. The latter is a digital canvas that functions as a Wi-Fi enhancer. The company also touted a healthy appetite for its subscription service, which Netgear CEO Patrick Lowe briefed me on.
The subscription is value-added services on top of the hardware. So you buy the hardware first, and then once you buy the hardware, you could choose from a menu of services to really add to the hardware. The most popular services that people now subscribe to are the cyber security protection, the smart parental control, and the extended support and warranty. Those are the top three.
I want to talk about some of the products that you've come out with in the last few months. You mentioned the Wi-Fi 6 mesh system and this very interesting new Mural Canvas 2, which is sort of an expander or an enhancer to that Wi-Fi, but it looks like an art painting. How did you come up with that?
The electronic canvas mural is actually, taking shape in what we would like it to be, which is a streaming services of culture. We started first targeting primarily the art lovers. So we have artworks from around the world, from the museum and from certain artists that stream to the canvas for the art lovers. Recently, we expanded it to popular cultures. For example, a few weeks ago, we added the content of the Game of Thrones, and today we're adding the content from Marvel, the comic books and the movie series. So we will continue to expand the content to address more and more audience, and we believe that there is a tremendous appeal to it. And over the last 1 year, we also found a lot of professional and semi-professional photographers using it to showcase their work. And so we think that this actually would have a lot of legs to expand its reach.
How did you find people to participate in this project with you?
Right now, what we do is we have a specific team of what we call content curators in New York City, who would actually contact all the content providers, initially with the museums and the artists. Now reaching out to the studios and movie studios, and we will continue to expand that. And on the other hand, we have been showcasing our electronic canvas in high-end stores such as Bloomingdale, such as the beta stores and equivalents. But as our audience is widening, we believe that we'll expand our distribution.
We can't talk about technology without bringing up the U.S.-China trade fight. How has that affected your production, and have you moved any of your manufacturing out of China because of the trade fight?
Well, certainly we are under no other option but to move the production for U.S.-bound products outside of China. We are about 90% there. We have another 10% to do before the end of the year. So by early next year, all the production of the products destined for the U.S. will be produced outside of China, primarily in Vietnam, Indonesia, and in Thailand.
That was Netgear CEO Patrick Lowe. Coming up, after Whole Foods and cashierless convenience stores, Amazon is now expanding its Go technology to further compete in physical retail. That's our conversation next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. PayPal has agreed to buy Honey Science. It's a tech platform for shopping coupons and rewards for about $4 billion. This would be PayPal's first major acquisition this year. Honey is best known as a browser extension tool that helps consumers find savings as they shop online. It was profitable in 2018 and has about 17 million monthly active users. Honey founders will continue to run the business. PayPal shares fell in after-hours trading. Now, Amazon is serious about competing in the $900 billion U.S. grocery industry, with plans to open cashierless supermarkets and pop-up stores as soon as next year. The Amazon Go expansion is part of the tech giant's ambitions for new store formats. That includes the possibility of licensing the technology to other retailers as well. Joining us to discuss it is Bloomberg Technology's Matt Day in Seattle. Matt, what do we know about this Go technology and how it's been working so far?
Sure. So to rewind a little bit, Amazon's been working on Go for a long time. About 7 years they've been on the project. They opened up their first store here in Seattle to the public in January of 2017. And they've since rolled out 21 convenience stores where you just walk in, grab what you want, and go. And now there's been a lot of skepticism among analysts looking at that model, saying, listen, the margins on a corner store are not great. If you're putting all these cameras and other sort of people tracking software in the ceiling, that's gonna weigh on it. So how can this chain really be sort of profitable and fit with Amazon's reputation for doing really big things and really big ideas? And so this expansion seems to be the next step for them.
And Matt, how does Amazon respond to those investor concerns?
So they haven't given a whole lot of detail on their Go roadmap. It's been a very secretive project, and they've only really recently begun to sort of let us in some of the details on the tech under the hood. And they haven't commented for our story, and they haven't really confirmed any plans at all on their expansion, aside from sort of further incremental new store openings on the sort of convenience store concept they've launched already.
Yeah, so you talked about 21 different locations so far. Any plans to make this a national rollout with the cashierless stores?
You know, there have been a bunch of large figures reported for what their aims might be, but the new bit that we are able to add is that they do plan to open supermarket-sized facilities. We've heard that the tech teams have been instructed to support spaces as large as 30,000 square feet, which is the size of a typical modern supermarket. We know they're also looking at smaller concepts, sort of a pop-up kiosk-sized model that might fit in a mall, sports stadium, or other area where you wouldn't want to spend a whole lot of time working with leased retail space. So we think that might be sort of the next vector after these convenience stores as they continue to grow.
And Matt, arguably maybe the bigger story that caught my eye here was looking at licensing out the technology to other retailers. Who in your mind and reporting might be interested in this technology?
Well, if you talk to the competitors who are working on Amazon Go-like things, their answer is everybody. You know, everybody is looking at this sort of technology and trying to figure out whether kind of removing some of the cashier frustration experience might be a good fit for their industry. You know, Amazon, CNBC reported first a couple of months ago that Amazon had been in talks with Regal, the movie theater chain, as well as sports stadiums on potentially implementing a Go-like solution for them. You know, those companies haven't confirmed that, and so it's unclear exactly who's going to take them up on it, but we do know that at least right now they're planning to license this or at least launch that program sometime early next year.
You know, Matt, as a consumer, I have to ask, how effective is the technology at preventing basic theft?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure they've ever commented on the theft stats. I do know somebody in testing, a journalist I think who was reviewing it, you know, accidentally wound up stealing something and it wasn't tracked, and Amazon just said, oh, we'll forgive it. They say that their system overall is pretty good at identifying correctly what you pick up, and in typical Amazon fashion, they say they'll make it right if they say that you walked away with something that you didn't in fact take.
You know, Matt, the tech sector is applauded for starting these new innovations and being so creative with this technology, and you certainly get excited when you see this. Just to play devil's advocate, though, have they responded to any of the concerns about cashiers who now maybe won't have jobs? I mean, we remember maybe high school or college, that was our first job, our first way to sort of get into the workforce. If those jobs no longer exist, how has Amazon responded to those criticisms?
Yeah, so they've been really sensitive on the labor angle. I mean, Amazon will point out that these stores are not totally unmanned. They have people, you know, stocking the aisles. They have people helping customers who don't know how the app works get in and get out. And so they've kind of made the case that, listen, we don't think this is first and foremost a way to cut staffers, at least right now, certainly. But in the long term, I think it remains to be seen. You know, cashiers are the second most common job titles in the U.S., so there's definitely a lot of concern. We saw some criticism today of our news from a big grocery union.
Bloomberg's Matt Day, thank you for joining us. All things Amazon. And still ahead, Santander chairman says regulation should be a level playing field across different sectors and not just banks and big tech. That's next. This is Bloomberg. The chairman of Europe's largest bank, Santander, that's Anna Botín, has said in the past there's been discrepancy between regulatory restrictions for big banks and big tech. She sat down with Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker Tuesday for an exclusive interview to discuss her views on regulating and partnering with tech companies.
What is a bank? What is a bank? Does a bank just take deposits and make loans? Of course. But we do payments. We have always, and our strategy, and by the way, you haven't asked me this, but our strategy at Santander since I arrived is to be a responsible bank and grow loyal customers. Loyal customers, if I ask you, Eric, who is your bank? You're going to have one bank in your head, even though you might have 5 accounts. Am I correct?
That's true.
Right, so you're like 99% of Americans and most people around the planet. And so for that to be the case, I need to know you, and that's based on data. So my question to you is, why should data be regulated, now I'm talking about Europe, in a different way if you're called a bank or if you're called something else? You know, you as a customer should be able to ask me to share my data, but vice versa, also from other players, so I can give you a loan at 6% instead of 7%. So that is what I'm saying is we need a fair playing field. and distinctions between sectors. This is not just about banks and payment companies. It's about, transport companies, hotel companies. And so this is the issue we need to sort out.
Some of the big U.S. banks, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Citigroup, have started forming partnerships with tech companies to provide financial services.
Right.
Will Santander do that too?
We've been doing that. We're 100% in favor of innovation. We've partnered with a company called Cabbage, Ripple, many American companies. So what we're doing is we want to take these companies and services. When we don't approve a loan, we pass it on to, in this case, Cabbage. Ripple is at the base of our OnePayFX blockchain base. So this is exactly the point. We need everybody else to be open. So my question to you, what is a critical infrastructure in the digital age? So we used to say telcos were critical infrastructures. Isn't a device a critical infrastructure?
Could make that argument.
Digital wallets. You know how many people have a digital wallet in the world today? More than 2 billion. When you have a digital wallet, who should be part of that arrangement? Is it just the user and the, let's say the phone provider, or should it be whoever is issuing the card also? These are the things that we need to make sure we have clarity on.
And online brokerage Robinhood is offering the stock trading service outside the U.S. for the first time. The commission-free financial trading company is launching in the U.K. in the first quarter of next year. Co-founder and CEO Vlad Tenev spoke about his ambitions for Robinhood with Bloomberg's Guy Johnson and Bonnie Quinn from London. Take a listen.
We're very excited about it. It's our first live international market outside of the U.S. and an important market as we continue to execute on our mission to democratize our financial system.
It kind of feels like Robinhood's coming home, but nevertheless, you're not that well known over here. But talk to me a little bit about why the UK? Why come here first in your international drive?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. One, I would say the market has discerning consumers that are sophisticated and have a long history of having access to financial tools. So I think despite that, we could add a lot of value here because it's a culture more of saving than investing, and I think we could add a lot of value just making investing more accessible, making the barriers to entry lower to a younger audience and sort of a less wealthy audience as well, similarly to the US. And secondly, we've done a lot of customer research, talking directly to customers on the ground in the UK, along with many other places, and we have a sense that there's actually a ton of demand for the product, and that's somewhat proved out today with our waitlist launch. The sort of impression and initial acceptance and sort of excitement has exceeded our expectations.
So there was a bit of a bombshell through the system when Charles Schwab went fee-free, and then of course Fidelity followed, and it feels like it's only a matter of time before many of these brokerages just go fee-free. Is that your moat gone, Vlad?
Well, the way that we think about it is our mission is to democratize the financial system, and for us to execute on that, it's not enough for us to offer commission-free investing or really the lowest cost, highest value services to only our customers. It's actually imperative that we force the industry to change and to adopt our pricing and model so that every customer of any service has the best possible pricing. So I think it's a welcome change. It's great for customers, and I think there's a lot to be done.
So what's next in the democratization of the industry then, and how do you stay afloat and keeping customers that you have and gaining new customers?
We really look at our mission as expanding our footprint in two dimensions. One is obviously more products to our existing customers, so expanding from investing into multiple assets, multiple platforms, and then going into sort of any financial service that customers might need. In the US, for instance, we recently launched our cash management program, allowing customers access to really high quality spending tools and paying them interest on their uninvested cash. And then expanding into the UK and sort of that being a part of our overall global expansion to make high quality, awesome tools, delightful tools available to customers worldwide.
That was Robinhood co-founder and CEO Vlad Tenev. And this week, demolition on the future TSX Broadway building in the heart of Times Square begins. The $2.5 billion project is led by real estate developer L&L Holding Company. In an exclusive interview, Chairman and CEO David Levinson tells Bloomberg's Viviana Hurtado 5G technology will stream content at record speeds.
There are active discussions about 5G going on right now for Times Square. I can't get into the details of it, but this will be one of the most robust areas of 5G. And this platform that we have here and some of our neighbors are going to be participating in that 5G experience. So when all of that really happens, it's going to be happening here at the grandest scale in the world.
Is it going to be ready around 21,
oh, yes.
2022?
It'll be ready and we'll be ready.
You'll be ready. One thing that I was reading around the 5G in New York City component is that it's not just a technology question, and there has been a really robust global conversation about the competitiveness of the U.S. vis-a-vis China, for example, or Singapore-based Broadcom, but that it's a real estate problem because you need cell towers. Talk to us about what that's like when you get into the zoning aspects of it and the local politics of getting something like that accomplished and done so that 5G can be here and allow TSX to be what you envision it to be.
Well, without preempting a lot of the participants in this discussion, because the discussion is going on, so I want to be very careful about that. But I can tell you that the community, the authorities, the Times Square Alliance, our neighbors, all are preparing for that. This building is essentially an antenna to broadcast and receive information. Wi-Fi capabilities throughout Times Square will be unmatched. So I think that, it's all in the planning, in the discussions, and it's with us and our neighbors in the Times Square Alliance as well.
That was L&L Holding Company CEO David Levinson. And coming up, Trump meets Tim Cook in Austin, Texas for a tour of the Apple factory. Topic of conversation, tariffs. We'll have all the details next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Taylor Riggs in San Francisco. On Wednesday, Donald Trump's effort to tout U.S. economic growth clashed with his trade war. President Trump visited an Apple factory in Austin, Texas, where Tim Cook met him to discuss keeping Macs and iPhones free from tariffs. And I want to bring in Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman, who has been covering Apple this. Mark, give me your thoughts on how that meeting went between Tim Cook and President Trump.
Yeah, so I just watched it. Tim Cook was there with Trump, Ivanka Trump was there, Steve Mnuchin, other people from Apple, as well as the Trump administration, and executives from Flex, which is actually the creator of the facility where this computer is being built. Tim Cook basically walked Trump around the facility, talked about the different components that go into the Mac Pro, and how its final assembly is done in Austin, Texas. A lot of the components are actually built in China, exported to Texas, where they're putting the final assembly together. The biggest news moment that happened there is when Bloomberg asked President Trump if this is going to lead to some sort of exemption on overall China tariffs for Apple. And Trump said that that is something that himself and the Trump administration is actually looking at. And you saw aftermarket stock move for Apple about 0.6%, which is significant for a company with that market cap of over $1 trillion. And if Trump were to put in some sort of waiver overall for China tariffs for Apple, that would be extraordinarily significant because, as you know, on December 15th, that's when tariffs are going to kick in for the first time on the iPhone, which generates about 2/3 of Apple's revenue.
Well, Mark, along those lines of that tariff exemption request, we do know that Tim Cook was meeting with him to talk about the Macs and the iPhones, keeping those off the list. We do have that soundbite. Take a listen to how Trump responded.
We're looking at that, and the problem we have is you have Samsung. It's a great company, but it's a competitor of Apple, and it's not fair because we have a trade deal with Korea. We made a great trade deal with South Korea, but we have to treat Apple on a somewhat similar basis as we treat Samsung.
Mark, we have a trade deal with South Korea, so we have to treat Apple similar to Samsung. Explain.
Yeah, what the president is trying to point out here is that Apple produces the majority of its products in China, but it is an American company. And as an American company, they're impacted by those tariffs, right? Because the products are built in China and then they're exported to the United States. The difference is that South Korea is a huge competitor of Apple, and it's a company not based in America, and they produce the majority of their devices outside of China. So the point is, Apple, an American company, is getting taxed, a high percentage on its products, whereas Samsung, Apple's biggest competitor, is a South Korean company, and it's not really getting taxed. And what Tim Cook and Donald Trump are pointing out is that is not fair. It's basically a negative result of these tariffs. And so what he's saying is if there were to be a waiver, that's because of the unfair standpoint, given Apple is a big competitor to Samsung.
So, Mark, in your opinion, did any of this meeting today at the factory change the outline for the September, for the December tariffs and the impact on Apple?
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen is that Tim Cook has been extraordinarily influential in Donald Trump's decisions around tariffs. You've seen Apple get some waivers in the past. By the same token, Apple also has not gotten waivers on the Apple Watch and the AirPods and some other products that have been tariffed since the beginning of September. Now, this was nothing really new for Apple, right? This is not their first computer made in Austin, Texas. The previous version of the Mac Pro was made there. This is not a new facility. There's really nothing new going on here except Apple's PR, marketing, and presentation around it. And it's very clear that this is simply an appeal to the Trump administration to work with them in order to avoid tariffs, right? Tim Cook is doing what he needs to do as a businessman, putting his politics aside to get this done. And it seems like this meeting, this very public meeting where, Trump traveled from D.C., Cook traveled from California, Cupertino to make this happen, could have some influence, right? But we will have to see, and it's very possible there's a trade deal done even before December 15th. So I think one way or another, Apple's optimistic this is going to get done.
Well, and like you said, I mean, sort of a press day, so to speak, a win-win for both. Trump can claim manufacturing is being back to America. Tim Cook can say that he's talking about bringing manufacturing back. Does it really move the needle, though, as you think about all of the Apple products and what actually is made in Austin, Texas, what is made in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Mac Pro is really the only Apple device made in the United States, made outside of Asia, right? But the thing to note, Taylor, is that the Mac Pro is actually Apple's lowest selling product, right? This is the most expensive device. It's the highest end device they sell, and they're really not making or selling most of a lot of these, right? You're talking about iPhones, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of units a year. For the Mac Pro, this is an under 1 million a year unit product. So this is not a big deal in terms of Apple's overall product line. This is more PR than anything.
Thank you to Bloomberg Technologies' Mark Gurman. And coming up, Senator Josh Holley is making his mark by taking on big tech. We'll hear from the senator on how he plans to make sure companies like Facebook and Google respect your privacy. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Senator Josh Holley may be the junior senator from Missouri, but he's making a name for himself by being one of the Senate's most outspoken critics of big tech. He's introduced bills to make tech more transparent on data tracking, as well as trying to ensure U.S. consumers' data isn't sent and stored in countries deemed a national security threat. We spoke with Senator Holley about taking on big tech, starting with the letter he sent to Facebook demanding they explain their location tracking policies.
Facebook has said to its users now that they can turn off location tracking. Facebook users can, but as it turns out, you can't. Even if you say you don't want to be tracked by Facebook, Facebook on your phone continues to scan all of the Wi-Fi in your area. It continues to use your cellular location, and it continues to transmit that information to Facebook. So this is another misrepresentation, frankly, and I'd like to know, why is it Facebook is telling its users that they can stop tracking when in fact they cannot stop tracking? Google does the same thing, by the way, and I think this is just one more instance of these big tech companies not being honest with us about the data they're collecting.
So you think they're purposely misleading users?
I don't know how to read it any other way. I mean, you read the post that Facebook put up for all of its users saying that you can stop Facebook from learning your precise location. A very lawyerly phrase, as it turns out. I think the normal consumer would never imagine, if they say, I want to turn off my location services, that Facebook is actually still tracking them, still tracking the Wi-Fi, still using the cellular data, the cellular network to pinpoint their location. I think it's very misleading.
What would you like to hear back in response from Facebook?
I'd like to hear the facts. I mean, I want to hear their explanation for the difference between what they have told consumers and told their users and what they're actually doing. I mean, there's a huge gap there, and I'd like to hear them explain it in their own words, actually come clean, be honest, and set out the facts. But, you know, really, this just gets to, I think, the fact why we need to pass legislation. Congress needs to pass legislation that gives every single American the right to opt out of being tracked, period. No back doors, no workarounds. Every American should say, I don't want to be tracked.
Are you also planning to write a letter to Apple and Google, given that it runs on the Apple iOS software and Google's Android operating system?
Well, Google is already well aware of my concerns in this area, as is Apple. You know, Google has similar problems. I mean, Google testified to me under oath that their users could turn off location services and not be tracked. That's also not true. The Android phone constantly scans for Wi-Fi networks, constantly monitors your cellular network, even if location services are off, and it transmits that information to Google. So, as I say, the tech companies are really all doing the same thing. It is misrepresenting their positions to consumers while they collect this information. They need to stop.
You know, to be fair, we've heard a lot about data privacy. We've seen a few existing privacy legislation come out. They haven't gone anywhere. Why do you think yours has a chance to go somewhere?
Well, for one thing, it has bipartisan support. I mean, take the Do Not Track bill, which is a really significant move for consumers that would give every American the right to say, I don't want to be tracked. I don't want my location to be tracked. I don't want Google or Facebook or Twitter or anybody to scoop up information about me around the web, where I'm going. It would give every American a right to that. It's sponsored by Senator Feinstein from California, Senator Warner from Virginia. So we've got broad bipartisan support. It's a common sense measure, and it's something that consumers deserve to have.
I want to fold in your concerns about data privacy into big tech and antitrust, and the DOJ has sort of hinted at the fact that those two are a same issue. Is this a concern about data privacy, or do you have antitrust concerns?
Well, one of the reasons data privacy concerns are so pressing is because these companies are monopoly size. I mean, if we had a viable alternative to Facebook that wasn't scooping up so much data, that wasn't selling our information without telling us, then I would be less concerned. But the truth is, there aren't really viable competitors right now to Facebook. There aren't really viable competitors to Google, and that's a big problem. And so I am concerned about their anti-competitive conduct. I'm concerned that that's making the data privacy issues worse.
I think critics, though, to be fair, would say the big competitors are in China, and China tech is massive. If we break up U.S. tech, how do we take on China?
Well, I don't understand why promoting more competition, getting more innovation in the market would hurt our standing vis-a-vis Chinese competitors. But hey, listen, I've introduced legislation that would stop Chinese companies from entering this market if they're going to abuse our data collection. I've got a bill, for instance, that would stop companies like TikTok, a Chinese-owned company, from collecting all of this data and then sharing it with the Beijing government, because that's also a major privacy concern. So we can address the threat from China and the background threat there, which is Beijing getting our information, while also asking American companies to actually compete, to actually innovate, and to actually be honest with consumers.
So, Senator, I'm going to take the bait. Let's talk about TikTok and Apple. I want to know more about your solution, because we can't keep Apple out of China, and we can't really keep TikTok out of the U.S. How do we solve the problem?
Well, I mean, with TikTok, it's a pretty simple solution, I think, and that is to prohibit TikTok, which is a Chinese-owned company. It's important to know because they don't advertise that to consumers. Stop TikTok from transferring any data of Americans to China, sharing any of it with the Beijing government. We should just make that illegal. There should be a firewall there. And in the future, anytime a Chinese company wants to acquire an American company that is a data company, the State Department should sign off on that beforehand. There should be pre-clearance pre-clearance requirements. When it comes to Apple or any other company like Apple, they shouldn't be storing data in China and encryption keys in China. It's just too much of a security risk.
So TikTok should be under CFIUS review, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, TikTok, I think, is already under CFIUS review, but it should have been done on the front end. My bill would change that. It would require CFIUS to pre-clear, to sign off before a Chinese company can buy, or a Russian company for that matter, any country of concern when it comes to security. None of those companies in those countries should be able to buy an American company without pre-clearance.
What does a realistic tech bill look like that has a chance of getting passed?
Well, I think that we could start with do not track. I think that is a huge protection for consumers. It has broad bipartisan support. It addresses data privacy issues. It also is pro-competition because the do not track legislation goes to the very business model of Google and Facebook and also Twitter for that matter. So I would start there. And I've said over and over that I don't think the goal of comprehensive privacy legislation, whatever that might look like, I don't think we ought to let that stand in the way of actually taking steps right now that would be good for consumers. So I'd start with do not track, and then I would start with protections for children. I think that big tech shouldn't be able to direct ads to kids, shouldn't be able to track kids, and every parent ought to have the right to have their children's data deleted.
And around this issue, and arguably all regulation on big tech, Europe and the European Union has been much more strict than the U.S. Why have they been able to pass legislation and we haven't?
Well, I think because big tech has really purchased a lot of friends here in the Capitol. I mean, they have expanded their network of influence for years now, and they deploy it very strategically. I mean, give Facebook and Google credit. They know how to play this game. But the truth is consumers are impatient. Parents are impatient. They are fed up with their kids being exploited online, being tracked online. Consumers are fed up with being tracked online and not having anything to say about it, having no way to opt out of it. And I think the American people are going to demand action by Congress, and that's why this body needs to act.
Senator, I want to address a bill that you have been talking about called Ending Support for Internet Censorship Act, which is intended to address claims of anti-conservative bias within big tech. The Heritage Foundation, it came out and said that if that bill is enacted, it regulates online content, but it does risk eroding a lot of the free speech. How do you respond to the Heritage Foundation?
Well, I would say that, first of all, this is a pro-free speech measure. We need more free speech, not less. We need less regulation, less monitoring of content on the basis of political viewpoint. My concern is because Facebook and because Google are monopoly-sized companies, when they decide that they're going to discriminate on the basis of political views against conservatives, against pro-life voices, against pro-religious freedom voices, that means those folks are effectively shut out of the digital marketplace. That just shouldn't be the case. So all of these companies say that they don't make decisions, content moderation decisions, on the basis of political viewpoint. My legislation just holds them to that. It says, okay, you should submit yourself then to an audit every year to make sure that that is accurate. And if it's not accurate, then they shouldn't be able to keep their special protections under Section 230.
Should political ads be fact-checked?
Well, I leave that to the particular services, whether it's Facebook or Google or whomever is doing those. I would note that we don't typically do that in the context with TV broadcasters, but there is a backstop, which is that if an ad, and there's law on this, if an ad is so factually, it misrepresents position so dramatically that it becomes a form of libel, then actually you can sue. And there's a recourse in courts of law, and that's worked pretty well, I think, in the broadcast setting.
That was Senator Josh Holley of Missouri. Coming up, investing with a kindred spirit. Steve Jang was an early investor and advisor to Uber. Now he's got a partner to help bring funding to a generation of new startups. We'll have the details next. This is Bloomberg. Steve Jang's Kindred Ventures is entering a new phase of its investment strategy. Jang has teamed up with Kanye Macubella to launch a new $56 million fund. Their goal is to work with founders to form new startups as well as early seed stage investing. Previous Kindred Ventures investments count companies like Uber, Coinbase, and Virgin Hyperloop One. Joining us now, the man himself, Steve Jang. Talk to me about this new sort of bigger fund, if you will, how it compares to the earlier versions.
Sure. So Kindred Ventures, I started it in 2014 in San Francisco, and it was really a small seed angel fund with just me and some personal capital. Over the years, had gotten lucky backing some really amazing founders, solving some really big problems in transportation, logistics, cryptocurrency, decentralized systems, even sort of looking at marketplaces like Postmates and Poshmark and StyleSeat. So it's been a great ride, and one thing that I realized was that there was two learnings out of that. One, there's always great seed stage founders looking to bring capital in to speed up on their journey. There's also another situation where we saw, and my partner, who was at a prior venture fund before, saw this as a seed investor himself, was that there are a lot of problems out there that are important to solve out in the world, and we don't want to wait for startups to exist so that we can back them. We want to use some of our operational and founding background and say, how can we assemble a great team, a talented, dedicated team to go after that? And that's what we're doing. We have a twofold focus with Kindred Ventures now.
So you say that you're vertical agnostic, but where are you going to be focusing?
You know, if I could pick themes, we are theme agnostic, but if I could pick themes, you know, the importance of the problems out there really rest in, you know, what is the software and data network that runs our daily lives? What is the transportation, logistics, food, health and wellness sort of supply chain and network that is happening around the world? And that can vary between developing countries as developed countries, but and thinking about cities, what's happening in cities, and if you think about education and work within that. And so I know that's a broad set of categories, but really we like to think about it as where are the problems for people in society today and the economy, as opposed to looking at specific types of technologies looking for a purpose.
You've mentioned transportation a few times, and of course we all know your early involvement in Uber. What do you make of Travis Kalanick selling out almost $1 billion of his shares?
You know, I think there's been a lot of talk about that type of stuff, and the company's obviously under a fair amount of scrutiny just because of the rise and the amount of sort of integration it is into everyone's lives. You know, founders and executives and previous shareholders, early shareholders in any public company find diversification. They're always selling a certain percentage of their holdings after lockup. So I think it's sort of a big deal made out of something that's pretty typical. So if you look at any public company, especially tech companies where there's a large shareholder or set of shareholders in the beginning, from venture capitalists as well as founders, you'll see this often.
So you think most of this is a liquidity play, not there's a deeper issue going on inside the company and I need to get out sort of play?
No, I think that this is a very typical thing for large early shareholders.
You also mentioned Postmates, which was one of your companies. A competitor, if you will, DoorDash, yesterday said that it was weighing a direct listing. How in this market are you differentiating an IPO versus a direct listing? Why not just raise more money in the private markets and direct list?
Well, I think the private equity markets have made their bets over the last few years in venture, and I think that you're seeing a lot of movement from other asset classes into early stage, mid-stage growth, as well as sort of like mezzanine pre-IPO financing. I think a lot of these companies have sort of saturated that market at this point at these valuations, and I think the right thing, just in the current IPO climate, might be to look at, you know, if you're profitable and you have enough cash on your balance sheet, why not do a direct listing? And I think that in certain cases makes a ton of sense. A direct listing is really a better route if you don't need to raise a ton of cash at the actual offering date.
You mentioned profitability. I have to ask, is that even anything on your radar, or you really don't care given how early of an investor you are and you're okay 5, 10 years out?
Oh yeah, we're investing. I sort of compare it to being sort of in the deep ocean versus the turbulent surface of the sea, and we're investing so early in a company's lifetime that we're really at the cusp of where technology is applied to create a really interesting offering for customers and participants. And so we're not looking at profitability at seed stage. We're looking at, can you find product market fit with your particular concept?
We only have 30 seconds. Give me your thoughts on WeWork. Do you have any? Have they structurally changed this market environment?
I think if you ask people that live and work for WeWork or have their company there or work out of a WeWork facility, they'll tell you it's great. I think from an investor perspective, valuations mean everything in the private markets. It sort of decides whether or not people think you're a great company or you're a failure. And I think that the WeWork product is still very, very good. I think there's just a fair amount of financial fitness that needs to go into the business model.
Yeah, wonderful. Steve Jang of Kindred Ventures, thank you for joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology. This is Bloomberg.